And we got this kind of idea from Chris Trapasso, who covers the NFL for CBS Sports. And he was talking about guys that could make a leap in their second year. But what about some guys that could make an impact as freshmen? And we'll pull up that full screen for you again. Here are the 5 guys that I kind of listed. And we kind of went through these guys categorically. But let's start at the top. Unlikely, but crazier things have happened. I want to start with Walker White. And Drew, this guy, the number 41 player in the country, number 5 quarterback. You look at Auburn and you think about the second year on the Plains under Hugh Freeze. Peyton Thorne coming back from another year, the second year transfer from Michigan State. He's got 38 starts under his belt. We've seen a little bit of Hank Brown. We've seen a little bit of your guy, Holden Gariner. Walker White, to me, kind of falls because he has all the physical traits that you could want in the position. 6'3", 220 pounds. He was kind of the apple of our eye throughout the evaluation process. You and I really pressed to get him into the All-American Bowl, and we're glad that we did. We got to see glimpses of him and what he can do during the spring showcase for Auburn. Drew, this is not a guy that I would expect to see a lot of. But you think about the physical ability, not only the arm talent, but the raw athleticism as a runner, the way that he is built physically, he is ready for the rigors of the SEC football. I think they can kind of use him in a different way. You saw Robbie Ashford, Peyton Thorne last year. Both those guys kind of give you something different. But if Hugh Freeze is looking to get creative, especially in short yardage, goal line situations, I wouldn't mind giving Walker White, a guy that's kind of a raw developmental guy, a little bit of taste of the SEC as a true freshman.
You mentioned that All-American Bowl evaluation. I mean, that was so key for him. And Eric Richards, who heads up the selection process, he was a bit hesitant, and he admitted it. But after that first AAB practice, when he saw Walker White throw the 2-ball, he turned to me and said, okay, I see it now. And Walker White, we saw a little bit of it in Auburn's spring game, Coop. I think you're right, and it's maybe situational packages. I mean, this was a kid that was on my freaks list. He grew up and in the summers was doing P90X and he is built, and you've always used this comp, Will Levis, in terms of he is a muscular quarterback, and he can beat you with his legs, but he also wants to sit in the pocket and air it out. I just think about Auburn, all the talent they've added on the defensive side of the ball, what they have brought in at wide receiver. I think it's still going to be difficult for them to light up scoring boards, and Walker White could be a cheat code of sorts in terms of, okay, we bring him in, and it's going to give the defense a different look. So you're right, not likely. But I wouldn't be surprised if he avoids that redshirt season, right? What is it, 4 games he can appear in and still preserve a year of eligibility?
Yes, and just remember, I'm looking at some of the comments in the chats. There's some talk about Aiden Childs. Remember, this is true freshmen. This is not redshirt freshmen. So these are guys that are going to play their first year of college football. But Walker White, Drew, what do you think about that Will Levis comp? I just think he's going to be like a household name in scouting circles here relatively soon. I think a lot of people are going to look at him. They're going to get flashes of him. The more and more ball that he plays, I think people are going to kind of like salivate over the idea. And the funny thing about Levis is Levis went from this guy that was in a lot of scouting circles, really kind of a projected top 10 draft choice. He ends up becoming the first pick of the second round, kind of goes through the whole thing in the green room, doesn't hear his name called. Goes to a good situation in Tennessee. Obviously, they've had the coaching change there, but now he's kind of the guy that they're building around. Walker White, to me, just in terms of where they are in a physical trajectory tools, seems like that kind of guy. Like I see it as like a very comparable trajectory for what we can expect of Walker White. Too much too soon could be detrimental, but if they pace him well enough, I think Walker White can be the crown jewel, the foundational piece for Auburn, because I love everything that they're doing around him.
Well, I think the first time you threw out that player comp, Auburn fans were not happy. It'll be interesting to see what those people are thinking come October, right? Because Will Levis, certainly a ton of hype around him heading into his sophomore year in the NFL. So I love it, Cooper. I think you nailed it on the head, and the measurables are exact, right? 6'3", both right around 225 pounds. So I think you nailed it there.
All right, the next one, worth keeping your eye on, or as CBS put it, don't say we didn't warn you. That's from our editor, Trey Scott. Julian Sayin, Ohio State. And this one is pretty interesting, Drew, because you look at Julian Sayin, the 5-star out of Carlsbad High School in California, signed with Alabama. Nick Saban retires 9 days later. He's in the transfer portal. He finds a soft landing spot with Ryan Day in Ohio State. And you look at Ohio State and you look at the implications of a really pressurized 7th year for Ryan Day in Columbus. This is an interesting room here and an interesting team, because it seems to me, just like every year, but really this year, Ohio State has the team and all the pieces to compete for a national championship. Rarely do you look at Ohio State's quarterback room and say, I don't know if they have enough, but they've kind of pieced it together a little bit. Will Howard comes over from Kansas State in the transfer portal. Outside of that, you got Devin Brown, former highly touted recruit out of Utah, hasn't really done much. Lincoln Kineholz from South Dakota, really kind of on the developmental track. You have Aaron Nolan, another talented freshman. And then there's Julian Sayin. But Drew, out of all the situations that a true freshman could walk into, there's a lot of experience coming back for the Buckeyes. Chip Kelly, Julian Sayin's skill set kind of fits to me in terms of a guy that's a high-level distributor, has a really good command, feel for the offense. You got guys like Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka walking around. This is something for a true freshman quarterback to step into. You look around and say, hey, we're really not going to ask you to do that much other than really just kind of stay ahead of the chains. I don't know if we'll get there, but there is a case. And I kind of talked to some people around Columbus like, hey, it's not a priority, but we'd love to get this guy some run. So I do think there's some intrigue there with Julian Sayin playing early in Columbus.
I think that says a lot, right? Because you read off the list of quarterbacks, and I know some people have dismissed Lincoln Kineholz for what they saw from him in the bowl game, which I think is a bit unfair. I mean, we're talking about a backup quarterback, a kid that wasn't expected to play, thrust into action against a Missouri squad that had plenty of motivation to win that contest. I mean, no one opted out from their side of things. I mean, they were dialed up. We know Missouri, they brought the pressure up front. I thought that was a little bit of an unfair kind of evaluation for Lincoln Kineholz. So Julian Sayin shows up there in Columbus, right? I think he's the second true freshman to lose his black stripe during spring practices, right after Jeremiah Smith, who lost it in record time. And what has the returns been? Hey, this kid's ready to go. This kid's ready to go. To me, that's surprising, just given that the other arms that are in the building there, what we know about them, what we liked about them coming out of high school. But then you think about it, you go back to the Elite 11 finals last summer where Julian Sayin was the MVP, our alpha dog for the event. You think of his senior season, a guy that takes care of the football, limited interceptions. He can work under center, play in a more advanced type of system, and the ball placement is there. So, would it be surprising to see him out there? Yeah, for sure. But I think you could talk yourself into a path onto the field for Ohio State. And you look at the schedule, some early, easy games. Why isn't he playing in the fourth quarter?
As an objective kind of like third-party opinion here, you look at Alabama, Nick Saban, let's say that band stays together, Tommy Rees right now. You got Chip Kelly, Ryan Day at Ohio State. Do you like Julian Sayin's situation better now, or what it would have been under Nick Saban, Tommy Rees, in terms of how that really kind of fits his future?
Well, that's the other thing I was going to bring up. Remember Bill O'Brien, briefly at Ohio State, from what I gathered, really good relationship with Julian Sayin, and then now he's off to Boston College. I would maybe lean towards the Nick Saban situation, but the receivers at Ohio State, how do they want to move Julian Sayin around? What about you? I mean, where do you stand on that?
It's interesting. I kind of look at it. I think Alabama and Ohio State are in a comparable spot in terms of just the quarterback room. What happens after a Jalen Milroe? What happens after a Will Howard? You look at Ohio State, Will Howard's got 27 starts. I like Will Howard. Can he be the guy to take him to the promised land? I don't know, but I think he's got physical tools. You obviously see the intrigue in a guy like Will Howard. Outside of that, you look at Ohio State's quarterback room, Devin Brown's got one start. We've seen a little bit of Lincoln Kineholz, maybe a little bit too soon. And then you got Aaron Nolan. This sets up really well for Julian Sayin, not only this year, but years past it as well. And you talk about the other guy that you're going to link up with, the guy that we called a generational talent in Jeremiah Smith. If you believe you're that guy at the quarterback position, I don't know if there's a better spot. I think they need to consistently improve across the offensive line. They got some experience coming back there, but Judkins, Travion Henderson. Obviously, those guys will be gone after this year, but Ohio State consistently has shown that they can put their quarterbacks in a really healthy situation. We talk about it all the time: play calling, protection, playmakers. I think Ohio State has done a fantastic job there, and I think Alabama's going to do a really good job. But Alabama right now, getting Caden Proctor back was huge. They're super young, very inexperienced at the receiver position, so you could make the case as of right now Ohio State is a little bit more healthy of the situation. So we'll watch out for Julian Sayin. Drew, another one about Damon Williams, talking about the All-American Bowl. These guys representing University of Washington, originally signed with Arizona out of high school with Jedd Fisch. He follows Jedd Fisch to Montlake. Damon Williams, that guy, listed at 5'11", 185 pounds. So is Noah Fafita. Drew, I doubt it. I think we had him at like 5'9.5" at the All-American Bowl. But Noah Fafita is the comp of the four-star quarterback, the number 19 quarterback in 2024. A lot to like with this kid. He gets the gamer tag, maybe because he's under 6 feet. We love the way that he plays. We love the command. He went to the All-American Bowl. He's one of those guys kind of in the conversation for the MVP race. You talked about Anthony Calandria earlier in the show, really kind of it being circumstantial at UVA. If we saw Damon Williams, I think that would be the case. I think things have really started to move in his direction in terms of he put a good spring together. He got there. He's battling Will Rogers. This would be his first year as a starter, transferring from Mississippi State. Massive turnover there with a national championship roster, a lot of new faces. And if UW gets to that first half of that Big Ten stretch and they have not met expectations, there's an easy off-ramp for Jedd Fisch to say, you know what, let's just ride the young guy and kind of see where this can take us, build for the future. And they had to do, it's a very different situation, but there's some similarities to what he had in Arizona and Jaden DeLora coming over from Wazoo. And then all of a sudden, you got a one-win team, continues to get better every year, 5 wins in year 2, 10-plus wins in year 3. UW, I can kind of see on that trajectory because of the rebuild that is taking place, that Damon Williams could be the guy halfway through the season that says, you know what, low-hanging fruit, let's get this guy some run. I think he's got the ability to do it. Let's invest in our future.
I think the big thing that stands out with his situation is he is Jedd Fisch's guy, right? And you go back to the recruiting process when he was committed to Arizona. Everyone in that building, everyone in that department, it was, hey, are we going to get you guys going to get him into the All-American Bowl? And it worked out. We saw him inside the dome. He was electric both with his arm and his legs. And he follows that staff to Washington. And Cooper, you're right. I mean, there's a ton of transition, a ton of turnover there. They have to rebuild that roster. And why would you not ride with someone that has kind of been your guy from that 2024 cycle? That's the individual they identified. That's the recruiting battle they won. Remember, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin were involved with Damon Williams, but no, Jedd Fisch, they won out. Then they get that kid to follow them to Seattle there at Washington. I fully expect Damon Williams to be involved in some type of role. I wouldn't be surprised if he emerged at some point and potentially started some games for them. The other thing that stands out about him, we're going to get to Dylan Raiola here at the top of your list. Damon Williams beat him twice as a senior when Dylan Raiola was there in Arizona. That's the one kind of like nugget I think people forget about. I mean, they went head-to-head, and he slayed the Dragon, the quarterback that was always ranked higher than him there when he was at Basha. So I think just based on reading the practice reports, what we've seen, they're going to need an influx of talent and an excitement, and it makes sense to kind of tab Damon Williams as the quarterback of the future.
I think the contrast in play style as well. Will Rogers and Damon Williams couldn't be really any different. Will Rogers, you got a statue kind of distributor from the pocket. Damon Williams, a guy who likes to move around, is kind of more of that point guard, likes to live in the perimeter. Had 1,100 yards rushing as a senior there in Basha. Drew, as you mentioned. I think about Jaden Daniels coming in the spot that he came into 2 years ago at LSU. It was a young, inexperienced offensive line. The legs are so important for a team. They just give you so much more optionality when you have a team that's going through a transition, especially an offensive line that's still trying to gel together. I think that's where UW is right now. Damon Williams, like I said, I think he makes a lot of sense for a team in transition, and you get to build for the future as well. All right, 2 names that we are very, very high on and 2 names that we like a lot. Let's start with the number 1 quarterback in the country, DJ Lagway. Congrats to him. Gatorade commercial, that's pretty serious stuff. Florida Gators. He falls under the more likely than not. And Drew, in the article, when I was explaining why I think DJ Lagway has to play, one, he's just too gifted to keep off the field. Two, I think he's too important to Billy Napier. I think Billy Napier right now in a make or break year, he's got to showcase this guy. You got to show a little bit of the future. You got to show your hands, and this is the guy that you're tied to. Billy Napier's taken a lot of heat. The one thing that he's gotten right is DJ Lagway, and I feel so convicted, so confident in this young guy and what he's going to be and what he's going to mature to be. Andrew, you and I talk about all the time, we love ascending players. That's DJ Lagway since sophomore year. He's just done this, just kept climbing, and I think he's going to take his best ball to the SEC immediately. You think about it, his stature, 6'3", 225 pounds, multi-sport athlete, can get it done on the ground. I think the arm has come a long way. I think the decision-making has come a long way. And it's kind of funny. I mean, you think back to Florida and freshman quarterbacks, whether it was guys like Anthony Richardson, whether it was guys like Tim Tebow, Cam Newton. There's ways to get these guys incorporated, and you got a pretty good room and a pretty good comfort level in a guy like Graham Mertz, who started a lot of games in 43 games, a lot of experience. Graham Mertz was not the issue last year, but DJ Lagway can give you something different and can also give from 30,000 feet, this is important, the perception of that the future is in good hands, and that is really important for Billy Napier. Drew, I would not be surprised. We see this dude week 1, Miami, ready to play. They're going to have to find a way to get him involved, and the fun thing about this is I wouldn't just limit him strictly to his legs. I'd find a way to get him involved in the passing game as well. I think that's the beauty of him and what he can do, but he's just too good to keep off the field. That's kind of the way I see it.
I thought the throws from the orange and blue game, he was further along than I kind of anticipated. And I know it's, you're going up against your own teammates, ones versus twos versus ones, and all that situation. I thought that was really encouraging. And you think back to, okay, Max Preps Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year. He had as good a senior season as anyone in America. This is coming from people that have watched a ton of senior seasons. Coop, you're right. I mean, they got to find a way to get him in there. I think you hit it on the head, important for the long-term outlook of the program. The thing with DJ Lagway is Graham Mertz is pretty good. And I think Graham Mertz hasn't been talked about enough yet in that 2025 NFL draft. Our guy Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl, he tweeted out, the early kind of player cards they had for them. Graham Mertz was there. But Florida's got to find a way to utilize him. And why not talk him up all preseason camp in advance of that Miami game? Because you're going to give Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes something to prep for all August. Yeah, we got some packages for DJ Lagway. And you're right, it's not just DJ Lagway the runner, it's DJ Lagway the passer. So I think he is someone that they're going to have to get involved early because they're going to need him. And it's going to be exciting, I think, his freshman campaign.
I'm pumped up for that Florida-Miami game week 1. How many people you think are going to get the NCAA football game, the video game, and that's going to be the first game that they play? I mean, you got to be excited about that. You got the Gatorade Player of the Year, DJ Lagway, Cam Ward. It's going to be a fun one. All right, Drew, at number 1, Dylan Raiola, Nebraska, the 5-star, the number 7 player in all the country, the number 2 quarterback. This one just makes too much sense, right? We have him in the category of likely and may even start week 1. And let me tell you why. You look at Nebraska, 126 in passing offense last year. They also struggled to protect, 93rd in sacks given up. That's something that's a little bit worrisome. But Nebraska, 5 of their first 6 games are at home. That includes UTEP in Northern Iowa, not to mention Colorado, that had one of the worst passing defenses in all of college football. If you're Matt Rule, it's year 2. You just pulled off a major coup, beating out Ohio State, Georgia, USC for Dylan Raiola. Drew, the options there in that quarterback room, you got Heinrich Arberg. He started 8 games. He didn't eclipse over 200 yards passing last year once. You can only go up, right? And the thing that I talked about Julian Sayin coming into a really comfortable supporting cast, that's the biggest question mark in Nebraska. But what we saw out of Raiola, 6'3", 220 pounds, sturdy frame. Dad was an offensive lineman. He's got the pedigree, has a good feel for what it's going to look like. Played at Buford, one of the highest levels of competition in all of the country in Georgia. 34 touchdowns, 1 INT, took care of the football, super efficient. That's what you have to ask him to do. You have to have a steady dose of the running game, really good balance. I think they can do that. I think they can establish that. Whether or not he starts game 1, I don't know. Whether or not this guy's going to be a part of Nebraska's current outlook here under Matt Rule, yes, I think immediately. I think he's going to be part of the plan. So a lot to like about Dylan Raiola. Drew, from a physical standpoint, he's ready to go. Like, just physically, arm talent, everything else, he checks all those boxes. It's the decision making, all those things, understanding the speed of the game, adjusting to the speed of the game that will come. And conversely, to the other guys that we've talked about, Nebraska's in a situation to grow and take their lumps with Dylan Raiola. So I think they have to have a plan. They have to have a vision, which they will have for Dylan Raiola. They have to continue to protect and build his confidence. But if they do that, there's no reason in my eyes why you can't start Dylan Raiola week 1.
16 of 22, 239 yards in that spring game. Another one where you watch all the throws from it, and you're like, okay, he's a little bit further along than we thought. Coop, they have to play him. And I've said this from the jump. As soon as he flipped from Georgia right before the Nebraska football moving forward, it's going to start with Dylan Raiola because he is the biggest quarterback recruit in the modern era for them. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to dig back in the archives and look to see what they did back in the 70s and 80s, but this is the guy, right? Everyone that tunes in knows it is Dylan Raiola. The pressure is that they have to play him. They have to play him for a variety of different reasons, and he can get the ball to the targets. I mean, we loved what he does in terms of stretching it down the field. Go back again to what we saw at Buford, what we saw from him as a youngster, what we saw at the Elite 11 finals. I mean, you think about Malachi Coleman streaking down the sideline, that's 6 points right there. So, yeah, I mean, he's the one where it makes sense. And let me ask you this, right? With DJ Lagway, with Dylan Raiola, given where we are with the transfer portal, NIL, doesn't it seem like some of these big names, you have to play them, right? You're in a situation where you kind of got, if we can compare this to the NFL draft, right? They are first-round picks. How long can you wait until they're ready to go?
I agree. The funny thing about this is, doing research for this article, the top 10 quarterbacks last year, half of those guys have already transferred. And they're guys like Dante Moore, who started 5 games, played in 9 games. You look at other guys like Jaden Rashada, started 2 games, played in 3 games. Aiden Childs, who transferred, played in 9 games. Obviously, a lot of this is circumstantial with a couple of these situations. Chip Kelly, UCLA, even though that happened before he left with Dante Moore. Rashada, obviously, I think that one's been very publicly documented. Austin Mack, another one of those guys as well. So, yeah, Drew, you would think traditionally that playing time would keep those guys there. Nowadays, I just think it's a crapshoot. The guys that have stayed in the top 10, Arch Manning, Nico Iamaleava, Jackson Arnold, Avery Johnson, Christopher Vizina going to sit at Clemson, Keinholz, we mentioned, Kenny Minchie, Ricky Collins, right? So, I don't know. You think that there's some predictive type of way that you can try to get a good indication whether these guys are leaning in, leaning out, but it's the 2 most day 1 ready guys last year were Dante Moore, Jackson Arnold, Jaden Rashada. You could throw in that conversation, and 2 out of 3 of those guys already have new homes. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. You're kind of looking for some pattern. I don't know if there is one. That's kind of the outcome that I arrived at.
Okay, well, how many of this 5 starts a bowl game?
Of the 5 that we talked about?
All of them, right?
Oh, of these 5 right here in 2024?
Yeah.
I would say Raiola. The hard part about this is that if you consider, all right, where is Florida going to be? Are they going to be in CFP contention? If Graham Mertz is what we think he is from an NFL draft standpoint, is Graham Mertz going to play in a postseason game? Probably not, right? So that would be one to bet on. Dylan Raiola would probably be bet on. Damon Williams would probably be bet on. Ohio State and Auburn are going to be situational. If the line was 2.5, I would take 3. I know we love these prop bets, but I would go with 3 there. I feel pretty confident about that, and it's more circumstantial, really, at the end of the day. Who's the one guy out of that group that you're like, can't wait to see this guy freshman year?
I think Lagway. I think it's just Lagway, and because I think we'll see it opening weekend. He'd be one, and then I think Damon Williams is going to be fun at Washington. Coop, I wanted to ask you this: who was on the fringe for this list, because I wrote down some names, like who are some other true freshmen, and I was having this conversation with a group of 5 staffer actually over the weekend, right? Because I kind of went through the 130 quarterback situations. I don't know who wrote up the article and who's the expected starter. It doesn't seem like at the G5 level there's really any true freshmen that are going to break through and start, and that feels like, I don't know, such a difference than maybe 5-10 years ago. And it makes sense, right? You're coaching for your job. You can go get a veteran in the transfer portal. Why would you try to throw a freshman out there? So who else is on the short list for you that failed to make the cut in this top 5?
This came from our boy Hudson Stanish. Shout out Hudson Stanish, does a phenomenal job. Make sure you to follow him. He brought up Timothy Carpenter, who's now at Tulsa, Drew, who you were a huge fan of, originally signed with Indiana, transferred to Tulsa. He said there's some buzz around him. That was the one group of 5 name. The other one was Jaden Davis, which is ironic and not ironic in so many different ways, because he was such a, I don't want to say a point of contention, but a name that we thoroughly debated throughout the rankings process and the evaluation process. I don't know about Michigan's quarterback room. I don't know what to expect out of Orgy. I don't know what that looks like. Jaden Davis is a young, very mature signal caller, like the game within the game. He's got a very good feel for, and I love what he's put on tape over the last 2 years. You can argue balls and strikes when it comes to upside as it relates to the NFL, but in terms of the collegiate game and a guy that's very cerebral and knows how to stay ahead of the sticks, Jaden Davis kind of stuck out to me.
That's the one I had marked down. I've heard good things about him, and I think him participating in CFP bowl practices and him being around J.J. McCarthy and those other guys, it was kind of a moment where it's like, all right, I do belong here. So I think he's someone you could win with, given what Michigan wants to do. That's why I put him in the category. 2 others I wrote down here, because it's not easy. Like, there is no, I think you did an excellent job of assembling this 5. C.J. Bailey at NC State, right? They got Grayson McCall. I think he might have secured the number 2 role, so he'd be more out of necessity, injury. He gets in the field, but he had a long run in his spring game. You think about his senior season, came up big in some key moments for that Chaminade Madonna prep team that had Jeremiah Smith and JoJo Trader. Got better every single year, tons of experience under his belt. And the other one I wrote down, Coop, Elijah Brown at Stanford, coming over from Mater Dei, kind of the same situation. Stanford has had a ton of different quarterbacks there. Ashton Daniels, I think, is the projected starter. I think he's got a higher floor in terms of what he can maybe bring you early on there at Stanford.
I like Elijah Brown. I like the way he fits. The other one you and I have talked about a lot, and credit to NC State, is C.J. Bailey, who just seems to be a guy more than likely will probably need a year. But you think about what NC State's done at the receiver position via the transfer portal, guys like Noah Rogers. You bring in Terrell Anderson from the high school ranks. A lot to be excited about. Then you plug that dude in. The outlook 2 to 3 years from now at NC State is very, very positive. Guys, we appreciate you locking in with us at 24/7 Sports. And you want all the recruiting intel, everything that you need from a scouting standpoint as well, make sure to visit 247sports.com. Also, make sure to subscribe as well. There you see it, wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates as well.